What's up, Advait? Yeah, I'm gonna do a little Minecraft while we do our office hours tonight. What's up, Ahana? Hypixel? No. This is just a server I made a few weeks ago. What is Hypixel? I'm actually just looking this up. It's just a server. Is it free? Does it have like quests and stuff? Okay, Skyblock. I'll have to look into it. Hey Aria, how you doing? One sec, I'll be right back. Hello, what's up, Rakshita? All right. Can I go over some basic things for the test? Absolutely. So for the test, you're going to want to know, like I said in class, the multiple choice is going to cover both just part 2. So you've got like the different topics are going to be, photosynthesis, cellular respiration, fermentation. What else is going to be on there? Cell cycle. And then some stuff around cancer. For photosynthesis, you should know the reaction. You should know things like transpiration. Oops. Same thing for cellular respiration. Know the reaction. Transpiration. Stuff about ATP. What's up, Mr. Chang? I'm doing good. I'm doing good. How are you doing? What's up, Onslaught? There's nothing to submit for the 24-hour food log. just have a food log available. You're going to need to use it in class for an assignment we'll do. So no submission. It's just a reminder. Rakshita, around when are you going to post study materials? I'm going to be posting study materials hopefully sometime tomorrow is my plan. I just have to get them together and start working on that. I have a couple of things. I don't have as much study materials as last part, but I should have enough. Let me see. So if you look at this document, the things you need to know are going to be in parts 3 and 4. This was posted in the in Schoology. So kind of the key things in part 3, which was this idea of like we call cell energetics, which is kind of how cells get their energy. We talked about, ATP as like this important molecule that contains energy, immediate energy for the use of cells in different important functions. And in order to get ATP, cells have to do cellular respiration, where they convert glucose to ATP in a chemical reaction in the mitochondria. And then that reaction requires oxygen, and it produces carbon dioxide and water and ATP, which is then used by the cell to do things like muscle contraction, pump ions, help with building other molecules and doing other reactions. It's a huge, important molecule. Now, the glucose that cells use to make ATP comes originally, right, from photosynthesis in producers. And they use that process to take light, carbon dioxide, and water and make glucose. And so around photosynthesis, you should kind of have the idea of the ingredients and the outputs, inputs and outputs, and also know how plants get the materials they need to do photosynthesis. So for example, how do plants get the water? We talked about transpiration. Through the roots, up through the xylem, out through the stomata. How do plants get carbon dioxide? In through the stomata via diffusion. How do they get sunlight? Through their chloroplasts, using the chlorophyll pigment that absorbs the sunlight. And all of those reactants go together to produce a glucose molecule. And that glucose molecule is then the way that the plant stores its energy from the sun into a chemical form. The plant will then use that glucose in its own reactions of cellular respiration to produce ATP. Animals will come along and eat plants to get the glucose, and they will use it in their own cellular respiration reactions to produce ATP for themselves. And finally, we talked about the fact that if you don't have oxygen to do ATP, you do something called fermentation as a backup. And fermentation is a way of making small amounts of ATP in oxygen-free situations. And there's two types. There's alcoholic and lactic acid fermentation, both of which produce ATP in small amounts. And they occur in different organisms. Like animals typically do lactic acid fermentation, whereas bacteria and plants and yeast do fermentation of the alcoholic kind. And we haven't quite finished with part 4 here. Obviously, we talked about the cell cycle a little bit, and this idea of stem cells and cell differentiation, and we just started to touch on cancer, but on Thursday and Friday, we'll dive into cancer a little bit more and finish up talking about all this stuff. So that's kind of the bulk of the unit. I'm assuming my chat died because I can't see either that or just no one's saying anything, which might also be, well, maybe that's just the case. Can I go over cell differentiation? Yeah, cell differentiation is really not that complex of an idea. I remember I used this image in class to show cell differentiation, but basically the idea is that cells can be different types, right? So if you look at an organism is composed of different kinds of tissues. And each tissue is a different kind of cell type that has a different function. So we have a heart. The heart is made of what is called cardiac tissue, which are these cardiac cells. These cardiac cells are unique and specialized cells that perform a certain function, which is namely to cause the heart to beat, contract, right? It's a muscle, so it contracts over and over and over again. Then you have other cells like fat cells, which are special cells that store lipids for energy, for long-term energy use. You know, a variety of other types of cells, neurons, et cetera, et cetera. All of these types of cells have come from originally something called a stem cell. And a stem cell is just a blank slate cell through which, when it differentiates or becomes different types of cells, is that is differentiation, basically specializing into different types of cells. So one stem cell might become a cardiac cell over time. Other stem cells would become a neuron. Different stem cells become different types of cells, and this is called differentiation. When different types of cells form in the early embryonic stages, when we have something like a blastocyst, which is a cluster of cells. What's up, Ashi? Well, you have to know every type of cell that progresses from a stem cell. So Ashi, here's the thing. Every type of cell comes from a stem cell. So will you have to know every type of cell that exists? The answer is no. You do not need to know every type of cell that exists, but you should know that if I give you any type of cell, even if it's a cell I've never mentioned before or you've never even heard of, you will still know automatically that it must have come from a stem cell at some point. And so I'm bored that kind of answer your question as well. Can stem cells become any type of cell? The answer is yes, but with like a kind of an asterisk on it. And no, Ashi, I don't necessarily need you to memorize this diagram. But like, for example, you should know some different kinds of cells that are in the body. Like you should know that neurons are cells in our nervous system that are used for processing, sending signals back and forth. You should know that there are like red blood cells that help deliver oxygen to our cells. There are fat cells. You should know a couple different kinds of cells. I think it's just a good idea to know them in case I use them. So the one thing about the asterisks that I'm talking about is that there are different kinds of stem cells that we didn't go into this level of detail in my class. I'm not sure if you are in my class or not. I'm bored. But in my class, I didn't talk about different types of stem cells. The only thing I did mention is that there are some stem cells in like mature organisms, like for example, mature human no longer has the kind of powerful stem cells. So let me find a diagram that might kind of show this. I'm trying to find a good diagram for this, but I'm not seeing a good one right off the bat. Well, I guess just in a general sense, the way that stem cells work is that there are really powerful stem cells in the early stages of an organism's development. Like in the very beginning, when an organism is forming, in the embryonic stage, where they're just sort of a cluster of cells, these are really, really powerful stem cells that can become any kind of cell. Now, in an adult, these don't, at least in an adult human, these don't exist. Oops. Oh, I erased the entire diagram. These don't exist. Instead, there are less powerful stem cells that can become only one like category of cell. So inside of our bones, we have bone marrow, and in bone marrow we have this type of stem cell that can turn into any kind of blood cell. It can turn into red blood cells and white blood cells, but that's it. It can't turn into like a neuron or a fat cell or any other kind of cell. So we would consider it a type of stem cell, but a considerably different one than an embryonic stem cell. So different stem cells exist, but in my class I didn't go into that level of detail. Hannah, can a stem cell divide into another stem cell, or does it always do cell differentiation? Nope, stem cells can divide into other stem cells, so they can become more stem cells. What's up, William? You know the environmental disadvantages of GMO crops, but you're not sure about the economic disadvantages. All right, William, let's see. So economically, GMOs pretty good because they make crops cheaper, they produce higher yields, they tend to be more pest resistant, all of these things. So typically it's an environmental gain. The one economic disadvantage that you might be able to attribute to genetically modified crops is that the way that certain companies, like I mentioned Monsanto, the way that they do this genetic modification is they will oftentimes, they patent their seeds. So these genetically modified crops are patented, and the genetics, the DNA is actually copyrighted. And so what that means is that if you're a farmer, you have to always buy new seeds from them. And so you become reliant in an economic sense on buying seeds from these large companies. And because it takes a lot of money and a lot of capital and a huge team of, really advanced geneticists and plant scientists to develop them, oftentimes these companies can charge a lot of money for the seeds because they don't have as much competition, because it's very hard to create them. And so what ends up happening is these farmers end up having to pay a lot more for the seeds than they would have otherwise had to. And so if you're a poorer farmer, it makes your investment at startup much more challenging. And on a yearly basis, buying new seeds is more expensive. And if you don't buy the seeds, like let's say you want to buy cheaper non-GMO seeds, the problem is you can't really compete with farms that do buy GMO seeds because your yields are much lower. So it's kind of a catch-22. So it can be a little bit of an economic disadvantages for certain kinds of farmers where that you have to now rely on these big agricultural companies like Monsanto to buy these seeds. One other issue that does pop up with genetically modified seeds is because they're patented, you cannot sell. So for example, let's say I want to be an organic farmer and I want to sell organic corn, meaning, and we know that organic means no synthesized chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and they're non-GMO. So I'm growing non-GMO corn, not using pesticides, not using, or at least not using chemical pesticides or chemical fertilizers, maybe using more natural versions. But the problem is we know that the way corn works, the way plants work, is they reproduce by spreading their pollen into the air. And so let's say I'm downwind of a farm that's growing GMO corn, right? Let's say it's Roundup Ready corn that Monsanto sells. It's totally possible that my organic corn could get fertilized by pollen from a neighboring crop that contains the genetically modified version, and that could sneak its way into my crop unbeknownst to me. Like, I would have no idea. And so now I'm growing genetically modified corn when I didn't even buy the seeds. It just happened to like get into my crop through the wind. And so then Monsanto can come to me and said, hey, like if they somehow find out, right, they oftentimes what they do is they do test farms corn to make sure that farmers are not like using their seeds without licensing them because it's a patented product. They'll sue them, be like, hey, you have, our corn and you haven't purchased it from us and you haven't got the rights to that. So guess what? We're going to sue you. And unfortunately, it's like, well, what do you do in that case? How can you prove that it was via the wind and not other means? So it can get weird there too. But yeah, those are kind of the main ones. Ahana, if you have a stem cell in your bone, for example, and it makes a neuron, how does it go to the brain? How does it know where it has to go? Okay, so Ahana, this is not happening in an adult, right? So what you're talking about, this idea of a stem cell becoming a neuron, does not happen in an adult organism. It's only happening in a developing embryo. And the way that a developing embryo knows where to put certain kinds of cells is a very complicated process. And there's a whole topic of biology called developmental biology, which is all about analyzing how embryos form and how neurons know where to cluster to create eventually what will become the brain, and where muscle cells know where to cluster to become the brain. I don't really have a high level of knowledge of developmental biology. I just know that there are certain signals and certain ways that cells know where to go based off of where they are positioned in the early embryo. So there's a sequential thing that happens as an embryo develops where certain cells are arranged in certain ways and they become certain kinds of tissues. It's very complicated, well beyond the scope of this class. If you're interested in that kind of a thing, I highly recommend you do some research on your own into developmental biology. So let's see. Let's look up. So developmental biology, right? Developmental biology is the study of the process by which animals and plants grow and develop. Hold on, what's it? Maybe. Yeah, see, develop cell differentiation, right? Right, okay, boom. This is what it kind of looks like. This is sort of what we would call the development of an embryo, right? It starts out as fertilization, a single cell that begins to divide. It creates an outer layer, an inner layer, right? Things get very complicated, and this is a very basic diagram, but essentially it's extremely complicated. Could I go over alcoholic and lactic acid fermentation? Ahana answered your question. Yeah, that's pretty good. Nice, Ahana. Thank you. Good stuff. Does that answer your question, Arya? If you want to know more, let me know. Rakshita, this might be pushing the level of info you're providing today, but is it possible if you can give us a sample short answer question that is similar to the one on the test? Unfortunately, I don't have one off the top of my head right now, so I can't provide exactly that. All I can give you is more general information about what you could expect. So what you could expect is a question that's going to incorporate different aspects of both part 1 and part 2 throughout the semester throughout the unit. So there may be a question that asks you to think a little bit about how enzymes are related to something like photosynthesis or cellular respiration, or how biomolecules are incorporated into these processes. So it's going to ask you to combine a little bit of what you learned from part 1 around enzymes, cell transport, biomolecules, and into part 2 with photosynthesis and cellular respiration mostly. What's up, Parsa? How you doing, dude? Could I explain glycolysis a little more? And could you also please sort of explain the Krebs cycle? All right, Ashi. So I know that different teachers went into different detail in terms of photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Now, in cellular respiration, the glycolysis and the Krebs cycles are two parts of cellular respiration. I don't need you to know those differences. It's not going to be a question I would ask you. So for example, if you just want the basics. What's a good diagram that is the basics? So here's like a very basic overview of what's called cellular transpiration. Cellular respiration. I'm getting my words all minced. So this whole diagram is cellular respiration. Now, cellular respiration, if you break it down in detail, has three main parts. It has glycolysis, which happens first, which is what takes glucose and converts it into a molecule called pyruvate. That releases a little bit of ATP. That pyruvate then enters the mitochondria, goes through something called the Krebs cycle, which releases a little more ATP, right? That produces a molecule that goes out and goes through the electron transport chain, which releases even more ATP. So all the ATP that's released comes from three different steps in the process. So that's, but you don't need to know this. So I don't want to spend too much time on it because I don't want people to think that they have to know something they don't have to know. So, what's up, Amy? New background. Yeah, I moved on Sunday. So this is a new room, new place. Could I explain the chemical equations of fermentation a bit? Sure, Arya. That is an ant. That is true, Parsa. That is an automatic negative thought. You need an antidote to that ant. So you want to know the equations of fermentation? Chemical equations of fermentation. So the chemical equations of fermentation so I don't need you to know much detail about the chemical equations of fermentation. This is pretty good. This is pretty much all you need to know. This is for ethanol fermentation or alcoholic fermentation. Obviously, lactic acid would not have. Right. So obviously, when I talk about fermentation, this is alcoholic fermentation. Now, you need to know the chemical formula for glucose, C6H12O6, but glucose is turned into ethanol and carbon dioxide. Now, this is the technical equation for ethanol, but you don't need to know ethanol's formula. Now, all you need to know is what's written in blue. You need to know that glucose turns into ethanol and carbon dioxide in fermentation, plus 2 ATP. Ashi, you do not. Yes, there are multiple ways to make ATP. There's fermentation, there's cellular respiration. Those are the ways that a cell can make ATP. Now, if it goes through cellular respiration, it's making ATP at different points in the process. So as it goes through cellular respiration, there's glycolysis, there's the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain, the ETC. These 3 stages in cellular respiration all produce ATP. And in the end, a total of 32 ATP is produced when you add up the ATP that's produced at those 3 different steps. Can a tumor be malignant but not have cancerous cells? No. By definition, malignant and cancerous are the same. So if something is malignant, it is also cancerous. If it's not cancerous, we would call it benign instead of malignant. That would just be the difference. Can I go over, hey Daphne, what's up? Can I go over proto-oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes? Yeah. I don't need you to know like a crazy amount about those 2 things. What I need you to know is just that in a normal cell, right, a cell that has no cancer, mutations, or anything like that, it's a completely fine cell that's doing its normal task, completely in line with what it's supposed to do. There are genes that cells have. Now, we haven't really talked about genes too much. So just to kind of give you a basic idea of what a gene is a sequence of DNA in which it codes for a particular kind of protein. So let me maybe help with this a little bit. So I'll start off with a proto-oncogene real quick. And I know I didn't explain this in too much detail in class. And part of that was simply because I don't need you to know it to such a high level of detail. But essentially a proto-oncogene, as you can kind of see defined here, is a gene, right? Which, if it gets a mutation in it, is likely to become what's called an oncogene. So the word proto usually means before, like a prototype, right? A prototype is something that you design that is before the actual thing that you create. So a proto-oncogene is a particular gene in the cell that if it gets a mutation, like if it gets damaged or mutated, it becomes an oncogene. The word onco refers to cancer. So for example, an oncologist is a doctor who treats cancer, right? Oncology is the study of cancer. So onco means cancer. So if something is an oncogene, it means it's causing cancer, right? Which contributes to cancer. So a lot of these genes, these proto-oncogenes, regulate something like apoptosis or programmed cell death, right? This is the signal that tells a cell to self-destruct, meaning, something's gone wrong, self-destruct so that you don't become cancerous. However, if there's a mutation in this gene, Now the cell doesn't do apoptosis, and it can potentially become cancerous, which is why it's called a proto-oncogene. Now, a tumor suppressor gene, tumor suppressor gene, is just that. I mean, I think it's a little more obvious, right? When you see like tumor suppressor, these are cells that are meant to keep the cell cycle in check, just kind of like what Ahana said, right? It keeps them in check and slows down the cell division by holding the cell accountable for any errors or mistakes it makes during the normal cell cycle, right? And so this is a gene that's really important for suppressing tumors. Now, if there's an error in a tumor suppressor gene, like a mutation, now it no longer is working to slow down cell division, repair DNA, and do all these things. It's possible for a cell to become cancerous. So the reason why I brought up proto-oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes is because they're the two kinds of genes that are important for regulating the cell cycle and making sure a cell doesn't become cancerous. But of course, if they get mutated and damaged and changed, they can become cancerous. So they're really, really important. Parts of the online servers have thousands of tryhards. That might ruin the experience for you. Yeah, I know the nature of online gaming. I understand that. The tryhards out there. Ashi, is the oncogene cancerous, or does it eventually become cancerous? An oncogene is by definition a cancerous, a gene that is can lead to cancer. So the gene itself is not you wouldn't call a gene cancerous. You would call a gene potentially cancer causing. A cell can be cancerous, but a gene would be cancer causing. Exactly, yeah. Ahana's on top of it as usual. Will the multiple choice be split up into different parts? Yes, Rakshita, it will be. It will be 3 parts. It will be split into 3 parts. I think it's going to be 2 7-question parts and 1 10-question part. Wait, there was something back here that I forgot to mine. There was a little bit of iron. And then, of course, there'll be a 10-minute short answer part. Oh, I forgot that that mining coal gives you experience. Like, I don't get why coal gives you experience, but things like gold and iron don't. Redstone gives you experience too. anyone in the chat that plays Minecraft know why that is? Or is it just random? Some more coal in here. Ooh, nice. Lapis lazuli. Does that give you experience? Let's see. Yep. Well, that's what I was going to do. I wanted to find a little bit of some review material that I could give everyone who here tonight a little head start on it before I post it tomorrow. That's what I'll do. Just get this coal real quick. Amazing. Are you a JLP fan, Justin? Ahana, how do benign tumors get made if the cells aren't cancerous? That's actually a good question. I don't think I know much about that. Let me take a look at it. Let me think about it real quick. So if you have a benign tumor, we classify that as non-cancerous. So the question is like, well, if it's non-cancerous, why does it actually even form a large mass, right? Because usually when we think about cancer cells, we consider like large masses of cells from dividing cells. Let's look it up. How do benign tumors form? Okay, the exact cause is often unknown. It develops when the cells in the body divide and grow at an excessive rate, right? Okay, so they're dividing and growing at an excessive rate, which is like cancer. Typically, the body is able to balance cell growth and okay. Benign tumor is a mass of cells that lack the ability to either invade neighboring tissue or metastasize, spread throughout the body. When removed, benign tumors usually do not grow back, whereas malignant tumors sometimes do. Unlike most benign tumors elsewhere in the body, benign brain tumors can be life-threatening. Okay, makes sense, because if you have a growing mass of cells in your brain, it can push and disrupt some important brain functions. Although benign tumors will not metastasize or locally invade tissues, some types may still produce negative health effects. The growth of benign tumors produces a mass effect. Good video game. A mass effect is the effect of a growing mass that results in secondary pathological effects by pushing on or displacing surrounding tissue that can compress tissues and may cause nerve damage. Causes. A tumor suppressor gene that is involved in cellular signaling, absent or dysfunctional P10 protein, allows cells to overproliferate, causing hamartomas. No, this is not going to be on the test. This is more just from an interest, a research perspective. Ahana asked an interesting question, and I didn't know the answer, and I wanted to look it up. So it seems like a benign tumor has the similar characteristic of a malignant tumor in the sense that it's fast dividing cells forming a mass. The difference is that they don't have some of the really serious characteristics of a malignant tumor or cancerous cells, in which is it doesn't spread and it doesn't invade tissues nearby. So it's likely that a benign tumor is made of cells that are only a problem in the sense that they're dividing over proliferating. So the word proliferate means to increase in number, divide essentially. So they're over proliferating, but they're not going crazy in the sense of like some of the things that malignant tumors do, like spreading or recruiting blood vessels to them, and doing all these different kinds of things that cancer and malignant tumors do. Right, so it just seems like the way we distinguish benign and malignant is based off of its invasive potential, which is this idea of its ability to actually affect other areas of the body. Right, so look at this picture. Benign tumor on the left, malignant tumor on the right. So what this looks like is the benign tumor. This, to me, what this looks like is an intestine, right? Or maybe like a colon. This could be colon cancer here, right? Like, so here's the interior of the colon, and there's a tumor growing. This is like probably like a little polyp that turned into a benign tumor on the interior of the colon. It shows that in a benign tumor, it will just sort of stay there and get a little bit larger over time. Whereas a malignant tumor starts to like spread through the lining of the colon and into nearby blood vessels and just sort of like, going outward like that. Much nastier, much more deadly. That's kind of like an intense visual there. Yeah, see, more of a simplistic representation. Benign tumor just stays nice and stationary right there. A little like encapsulated area, whereas the malignant tumor is like spreading out. But it all comes back to the fact that benign cells have to be formed by cells going through cell cycle at excessive rates. Yeah. Not AKA cancer, though. So don't say AKA cancer there. So just because a cell is dividing excessively does not mean it's cancer. That is one characteristic of cancer. But in order to be classified as cancer, it has to have that characteristic plus invasive potential, meaning this sort of thing where it's spreading out to other places. So the original reason was that it's called cancer is because it looked under a microscope, it looked like a crab, because you know how crabs have legs that sort of spread out. Like, so this tumor is sort of like crab-like, which is why it's called cancer. So, what do you mean except for hair? What does that mean, except for hair? Because hair is fast dividing. Tumors are scary. Parsa, they are no joke. Cancer is one of those things that most everyone will have experience with either firsthand or via someone that they know. I don't know anyone in my life that hasn't experienced somebody that they know with cancer at some point, And I think, and obviously the older you get, the more that goes up, because cancer cancer is one of those things that the risk of it goes up as you age because your cells divide more, and as cells divide more, the risk of a mutation accruing that can create a cancerous cell, it goes up. It's just like a statistic probability increase over time, right? Now, of course, if you expose yourself to what are called carcinogens, which are chemicals or substances that cause cancer or are known to cause cancer, your risk is higher, right? So if you're somebody who partakes in tobacco smoking, we know that tobacco and the tars that are associated with cigarettes and cigars and things like that are carcinogens. Onslaught, I saw something on Schoology via the email notification that said something about a Unit 2 retake for apes. Are you planning to announce that tomorrow or something? Could you clarify that one more time, Onslaught? You saw something on Schoology via email notification. I sent a notification out. I sent an email out today with information about the final. But I didn't say anything about a Unit 2 retake. I said retakes will be available. Oh, I need a water bucket. I said retakes will be available starting relatively soon. So Unit 2 is falls under that purview. What's up, Manu? Ahana, I thought that hair is the only other type of thing that is formed by fast-growing cells. Yeah, hair follicles are fast-growing. Yep. Well, I mean, you have a lot of fast-growing cells in your body. Skin cells are fast-growing. Endothelial cells, which are the cells that line your digestive tract, which goes from your mouth to your throat to your stomach, your intestines. Those are fast-dividing. Yeah, those are the three main ones. Hair follicles, skin cells, and endothelial cells are all quick, fast dividing. Oh yeah, liver too. Yeah, good point, Nathan. Your liver cells are relatively fast dividing. Probably not as fast as something like a skin cell or... So Ahana, you did the research we did not answer your question about benign tumors? What causes them? It's just it looked like, according to my brief research there, that there's typically some sort of error or mutation in something called a P10 for some kinds of benign tumors. A P10 gene, which is a cell division regulator, which makes the cells proliferate faster than they otherwise should. However, it does not lead to its ability to be invasive and spread to other cells and other tissues. That's pretty much it. So benign tumors just has one aspect of a malignant tumor, and that is its fast division, but it's lacking the other characteristics that make cancerous tumors much worse. So yeah, Onslaught, just take a look at that email, the notification I sent. What's up, Neil? How goes it? Gotta go get a water bucket. Parsa, you should consider yourself lucky that nobody in your family has gotten cancer. It's pretty, if you look at the stats, cancer, it's in the top, I want to say top 3 causes of death. Wait, is this just a bucket? class out of here, put it in here. I have not yet, Ahana. I won't know as much information about the bio final as I do about the apes final, because I have with apes it's just me and Mr. Gann, just two of us teach the class, so we really only have two people that have to figure out what we want to do. In bio there's technically 5 teachers, but there's 4 main teachers that teach most of them, and so the communication is takes a little longer, and so we're hopefully going to decide on the final on Friday when we meet, and we'll let you guys know either on Friday or early next week. I hope so too, Parsa. My experience with cancer is I have been relatively lucky to not have anyone that's experienced cancer to such a level in which I've lost a family member or a friend to cancer. But my dad had, I believe, what was a benign tumor in his colon when he was in his mid-30s, which is basically my age now. And he had to have that surgically removed, where they cut out a section of his colon. And then in my sister, she had a skin cancer, a carcinoma on her forehead, which I believe carcinoma is a cancerous, but luckily it was early on because she caught it and they were able to remove that as well. So I have had family members with tumors, some with cancerous, some not. But I've been very lucky and fortunate to not have anyone who's died from it. Oh, and my grandfather had bladder cancer, which that was recently, and he, I think, is just finishing up a chemotherapy treatment for that, but I think he's okay. Last I heard, like last month or so. And, you know, these people are all different ages, right? My sister, she got it when she was like 26, which is very young. My dad was in his mid-30s, also relatively young. My grandfather is in his 80s, or wait, 90s? No, 80s or 90s. So older, more reasonable age to experience cancer. The problem with cancer, if I'm just going to like kind of go off a little bit about it, is that, and I'll talk more about this in class, is that it's cancer. The reason why it's so hard to treat and why it's so common is that it's sort of an inevitable process due to the the statistics behind it. So, right, like cancer is caused by an accumulation of mutations in certain genes that regulate the cell cycle. Right. So the more cells divide, the more likely, just by pure chance, a mutation is meant to come up, would come up that would cause something like cancer. And so basically, ooh, we got some diamonds. We got some diamonds. Here we go. Finally. And so over time, like the longer you live, the more likely you are to get cancer, right? So it's like if you lived long enough, everyone would eventually get cancer just due to the sheer probabilities, like this, the numbers, right? Which is why it's so common. right? Now, some people are just unlucky and they get it early. Some people are lucky and they never get it. And the reason why it's so hard to treat is because a cancerous cell is still your cell. It's still a cell that was produced by your body, and therefore your immune system is not as able to cope with it, because your immune system, the way your immune system works, is its main job is to distinguish your own cells from those things that would be foreign to your body. So like a bacterial infection, it's like, oh, bacteria cell, not our cell, kill, destroy, got it. A virus, not ours, kill, destroy, got it. Cancer cell, it is ours, but it's not behaving like it should. And so sometimes your immune system is not able to handle that kind of a thing because it's not easy for it to distinguish that kind of that it is something that needs to be dealt with. Now, your immune system does have mechanisms to deal with cancer cells, but they don't always work because cancer can sometimes be sneaky and like kind of hide from your immune system behind the guise of being one of your own cells. And so the tricky part is, how do you treat something? How do you kill the cancer cells and not also kill the cells that you need to survive? And that's why cancer treatments are very difficult. And we haven't really found a great way to do that. So a lot of the treatments that we use for cancer, like chemotherapy or radiation, all that they really do is they just tend to target cells that divide relatively quickly, because we know that cancer cells do that. So they kind of target cancer cells based on some characteristics, but the problem is other cells also have those characteristics. So for something like chemotherapy, the reason why you lose your hair and you get sores in your mouth and you're nauseous all the time is because you're actually destroying your own cells as well as the cancer cells. Just the goal, the hope, is that you kill off all of the cancerous cells in time before you cause too much damage to the person themselves. Thanks, Parsa. I appreciate that. I'm glad they recovered as well. Gandhi, what up, Gandhi? You watch Jones Clones? Oh my God, that's a vintage vintage film. Oh, my Adobe Genuine software thing keeps popping up. Get that out of there. I gotta fix that. Ahana, we also didn't learn about asexual and sexual reproduction. No, we didn't learn about that. Yeah, not yet. We'll learn about it soon. Nathan, your grandpa passed away when I was really young and he had liver cancer, I think. Yeah, that's tough. Sorry to hear that, Nathan. Liver cancer is a rough one too. And chemotherapy is no fun. Yeah, this time of year talking about cancer is always kind of one of those things that's kind of, you always know that there's going to be people out there that have been affected by it. Can I press F to switch to my left hand? You don't like seeing... You prefer this? Wait, what? Switch what to my left? I can't mine with a... I can only mine with a diamond pickaxe. Oh, do you... Oh, I see. Just in general to move. Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Yeah, Alex Trebek had, I believe, pancreatic cancer, which is one of the worst kinds in terms of its survival rate because it's usually undetected until it's too late and it's already metastasized or spread to other parts of the body. Because when you have pancreatic cancer, it doesn't really manifest as any sort of symptoms that you would make you concerned or aware or want to go to the doctor to get things checked. And so by the time you have symptoms, by the time you feel, any pain or discomfort or notice anything, sometimes it's too late. And in the case of Trebek, I believe that was the case. Although he did go through chemotherapy for a while, there was a point where I remember them saying I remember him coming out and saying that he had it potentially beat. Like he thought they had it beat, but then it came back on him. Unfortunately. Jones Clones 3? I've always heard that the third movie in a trilogy is... Wait, isn't the third movie always kind of like not so great? Or is it the second one? Wait, what is the normal rule? I'm trying to think of classic series that I know. You guys probably know more recent movies than I do. All I can think of that has more than... I can think of Harry Potter, but that didn't have only 3. That had 7 or 8. And that was first a book anyway. The Godfather, which is a classic trilogy. That one was apparently the first and third were better than the second. Yeah, you might be right, Ashi. You might be right. The second one is usually the one that's not so good. I know in TV shows, the second season is usually better than the first season. In my experience, when I watch a TV show, first season, pretty good. Second season, really good. Third season, oftentimes really good. Then fourth season, not so good. Fifth season, not so good. It just starts to go downhill from there. In my experience, when I think of this is my experience for a TV show that has more than 3 seasons. It's like this. Okay, here's quality on the y-axis and season on. So you have season 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Goes like this. That's my experience. Peak between 2 and 3. So, Arya, just to confirm, cancer is caused by an accumulation of mutations. Yes. It's not. Cancer is never just caused by a single mutation. Because remember, for cancer to occur, you have to have a mutation in a variety of genes that control the cell cycle. And that would require, probably somewhere around... Actually, I don't know the number, but it's at least several mutations. There's actually a really good... Radio Lab. Let me see this. We can listen to this. You know what's really kind of crazy? There was this. So there's these devils, which is this little animal, this little like rodent animal that has face tumors. It's called this devil cancer stuff. These are contagious tumors. So normally we don't think of cancer as being contagious. Like if someone has cancer, they can't give it to you, right? Cancer has to occur within the individual. But there was this weird case back in 2010. It was discovered in 1996. A wildlife photographer took this picture of a Tasmanian devil with a contagious tumor on it. And the reason why it was contagious was because, I believe because the Tasmanian devil populations were so small that individual Tasmanian devils weren't genetically different enough from each other that a cancer cell from one Tasmanian devil could get passed to another, and that other one's immune system wouldn't recognize it as different enough and would not attack it. So therefore you could pass on a cancer cell to another Tasmanian devil. Now, for example, in humans, wouldn't work because humans aren't genetically similar enough. Like we're different enough from each other that like my immune system would recognize someone else's cell and attack it. But it was an interesting case because the Tasmanian devils would sort of fight and they would bite each other. And so they would pass these face tumors back and forth to each other. Very crazy.
At Radiolab, we love fresh ideas. Radiolab is supported by Squarespace, the platform that can help you turn your fresh idea into a top-notch website. To launch, use the offer code.
Hey there, this is Looney Libby in Heartland, Vermont. Radiolab is supported by the CBS All Access series Star Trek Discovery, season.
Listener supported.
Bad.
Terrible tumors.
Really bad.
Scary, horrible tumors.
But
because we are fair-minded about everything,
even tumors.
let us...
Hold on. I'm trying to find the one that has... There's a very good description of cancer in one of these that I'm trying to find.
Listener supported.
Texture, but I do
Holy.
cigars died in July.
Came east and they...
Is a wonderfully...
Because toxic or some virus, and they found nothing.
And then along comes a woman named Anne-Marie Pierce.
Which isn't really that strange because that's what cancer is. It's like your genetic stuff gone screwy.
Right.
But then she looked at the tumor from the next devil.
And she found not just also mangled chromosomes, exactly these tumors were all starts...
A leaping tumor?
Yeah, a leaping tumor.
And this is the point in this tale where we really have to question everything that we thought we knew about cancer.
Okay, I'll listen to this real quick.
Now, most people think of cancer as like
A situation in which one of your cells starts replicating and doesn't stop. It replicates uncontrollably until it destroys you.
Okay, so that's like the one cell theory, which is frankly how I thought cancer worked.
Oh, Peter, we have to go ahead to start?
But then we spoke with this fellow.
Yep.
It's going to be
His name's
1, 2,
Carlo
3,
Maiden.
not the Roman
Cancer
numerals.
biologist at the Wistar
I
Institute.
listened.
He told us if you really want to
your
understand what's
feedback.
happening with the devils, you got to toss out the one cell theory. Because cancer is not just...
It's not just a cell going haywire,
No, it's actually many cells competing
competing for space, competing for resources.
Can you
in the
hear the
process
audio that's
driving
playing
each
right
other haywire. Like, if you were to somehow go into a tumor, he says, what you would find
is between 1 billion and 1 trillion cells in there.
now? Okay. It's a very interesting description
these
of the
are
way
different
cancer
cells,
works.
this huge clump of cells, and they're all fighting it out. Because, you know, space is tight, food is scarce. And what'll happen is in the middle of this melee, you know, as the cells are competing, each individual cell is trying to copy itself. Copy, copy, copy. And somewhere along the way, you get, eventually, a copying error. And every so often, says Carlo, one of these mistakes will give the new cell a new talent. And in the case of cancer, it usually starts with something pretty simple, like the ability to slurp up food faster.
Nutrients, like oxygen and glucose,
And now, with this advantage,
that mutant and all of its progeny will take over that area of the tissue.
but not for long. Because now you got all these mutants, and they start to fight. Until randomly again, you get another copying mistake. And maybe this second copying mistake gives the cell the ability to divide faster.
Right.
So there it is,
Proliferating faster than its neighbors,
and it takes over.
growing and displacing the other cells.
But yeah, it just keeps getting worse. Because now you've got these double mutants. They can eat fast, they can divide quickly, and they start to fight until you get a third mutation, then a fourth.
And you just keep ratcheting it up. And eventually, roughly 5 to 20 mutations.
You end up with a cell that is so
5 to
gnarled,
20 mutations.
so mutated, and so powerful that it can literally spit a kind of acid.
This is crazy.
Called a matrix metalloprotease that allows it to rip through the membrane barriers.
And this is when you're really in trouble, because now the cell can roam.
This is metastasis.
And so the cells leave the primary tumor. They've got to dissolve their way into a blood vessel.
That's a mutation.
Then they've got to survive in the blood.
Another mutation.
Then they've got to stick somewhere else.
Yet another.
Then they've got to dissolve back through the arterial lining.
And another.
Yeah,
So it sounds like cancer is always evolving to be more cancerous.
it totally is. This also explains why we haven't been able to cure it.
Why, when a person takes
Rakshita,
chemotherapy drugs, the cancer will go away
I don't
for a
know
while,
yet if there's going to be another quiz.
but then it'll come back stronger because the cells have evolved a resistance to those drugs.
When I first got into work on cancer, I was impressed at how malevolent the disease seems, as if it's being designed to kill us.
So here's my question: this leaping tumor in the devils,
Mm-hmm.
is this a case where the tumor is actually evolving into a new form? Like after, say, the 50th mutation or whatever? Like now it doesn't just have the ability to travel in a body, but it can somehow leap out of a body, through the air, and into another body.
Sure. I mean,
But I mean, that's really scary.
yes, it is. It is pretty scary, but this is amazingly rare.
And according to Carlo, demands some pretty special circumstances.
How would in a Tasmanian devil would
What's up,
some
Adarsh?
tumor get from one individual to another?
Yeah, I'm listening
how
to
would
some.
that
We were talking about cancer and
Tasmanian
bio.
devils, God
So I'm
bless them,
listening to a radio lab
bite
talk
one another in the
about
face a lot.
cancer.
They're scrambling over carcasses. They're fighting and biting and swallowing and crunching. And the males also bite females during the mating period. He's a little bit of a rough lover. So you have the male and the female biting each other. in the
Radio
face.
Lab. It's called
So,
Radio Lab.
A devil
It's a
with a tumor on
podcast
its face.
from
Let's say it's
NPR.
mating with another devil, and it bites that second devil in the face. What exactly happens at that point? Is it just rubbing its tumor
Okay,
against?
when you think of these big, ugly tumors, think of feta cheese.
Ooh.
And when one devil bites another, there's a tendency for the tumor to crumble and to shed tumor cells
That's
that
crazy.
then
These
fall
devils have
into
face
the
tumors that
wounds
spread to each other.
on the second devil.
But there's something here I don't understand. Why wouldn't the immune system of the devils?
Kill those cells, prevent those cells from taking root.
Parsa, what are
Yeah,
you talking
'cause
about?
that's what immune
You're being
systems
stalked
do.
by your
And
group chat
the latest
on this
answer
stream?
is that, well, Tasmanian devils don't have as much genetic diversity
What does that
as
mean?
you would expect.
What that means, David explained to us, is that the Tasmanian devil population has gotten so.
Do you need help?
inbred,
Do you need
they're so
assistance?
alike
Is this
at
a
genetic
serious
level
stalking situation?
That their immune
Or is this
systems
a
are now
friendly stalking
confused.
situation?
They don't know the difference between their own cells and
Oh, I need a
invading
shovel.
cells coming in from other devils.
Exactly.
Which doesn't actually sound like the tumor is all that powerful. So I asked Carlo Maley,
You get a mutation that's
is this really the story of a tumor evolving?
more adaptive.
Or is it just the story of a tumor getting lucky?
I think those are the same story.
How do you mean?
I mean, evolution is all about dumb luck.
Well,
The way you explained it, it's
Occasionally
dumb
you get a
luck that the
I would
tumor was on
recommend-
the outside of the face. It's dumb luck that they bite each other a lot.
That you
that
tell
a cell
them-
could come along that could shed and fall into
It's
a-
easy
a
to-
wound. It's all dumb luck.
It's easy
That, he
to
says, is
be
what makes
a
evolution
armchair
That's
critic.
natural selection right there.
And when you step back,
Where are they?
sometimes
They're
the
not
results are
talking in the
just-
chat. It's easy to make fun of someone for
Nuts.
Yeah.
Just nuts.
putting
This
themselves
is the
out
point
there.
where we need to talk about a
When you
transmissible
yourself don't.
tumor in dogs. Canine transmissible venereal tumor.
I don't need to listen to that anymore. Okay, I got 6 diamonds. So let's do... Man, this is going to take a while to build back everything I lost. It's actually really annoying. I think when it comes to like making fun of people that are your friends, there's a very fine line, right? Like when you make fun of people in like a friend group, you have to be very careful to make sure that because there is such a situation where it can be like when people are so here's the thing, like when you are comfortable enough with somebody and you know each other well enough, a sort of a level of gentle ribbing and making fun of things becomes a way of bonding, right? It shows that like you're comfortable enough with each other that you can make fun of each other because you know each other's intentions. Now, that has to be very clear, and that people have to kind of have that established relationship. If that doesn't exist, then it becomes an issue, right? So there are times where you have like a group of friends, and like if one person is constantly the butt of the jokes, that's not going to feel great, right? To be that person. Right? But, if everyone in the group if everyone sort of takes their turn kind of here and there, getting made fun of and making fun of each other, and it's just all friendly and all in fun, that's fine. It's a way of bonding and, having fun. But there is a fine line there. Your dad listens to it? Yeah, I used to listen to it a lot more than I do now, but it's a good one. They talk about interesting things and they present it in relatively interesting ways. Okay, I got my double. I don't even know what to do with a brown mushroom. What do I even do with this? That's good. That's good, Parsa. Oh, that's what I was going to do. Shovel. Might as well put these on. Might as well take that while I have it. And make a shovel. Wait, what the heck? Oh, okay. Now I get it. Yeah, what is it? What episode do you want to listen to? I'd be down. What's it called? I'll look it up. Yeah, Parsa, I was trying to figure, like, I knew that right-clicking it did, but I realized it's shift right-click. Right-click just picks it up. So I was like, wait, why isn't it equipping? And then I realized, it's shift right-click. Like you hold it and right click, easy equip. But see, if I right click, it just picks it up. Oh wait, you actually can't see because my screen, oops. Like right click just picks it up. But if I shift right click, then it equips. Oh, and your hotbar, I see. Hold on a second. I got to do something. I'm going to open up your link real quick. Colors. Our world is saturated in color, from soft hues to violet stains. How does something so intangible pack such a visceral punch? This hour, in the name of science and poetry, Jad and Robert tear the rainbow to pieces. To what extent is color a physical thing in the physical world, and to what extent is it created in our minds? Ooh, interesting. Is this the idea that, like, how do I know that what I see as red is what you see as red? Or are we just agreeing to call this thing red, but we really kind of interpret it differently? I've always thought that. That was always like an interesting thought process that I don't know if we can ever really know the answer to. Cool. How long is it?
Hey, this is Jad.
It's an
Radio
hour
Lab is
long.
supported by IBM. For businesses around the world,
It's a long one. I don't think we have time to listen to the whole thing. Which part is the most interesting? The first part, ripping the rainbow a new one, which is 19 minutes. The perfect yellow. Why isn't the sky blue? Third one? Okay. Ashi, is there going to be a Quizlet? I'm going to be, so right now I'm actually taking just a quick second to look over some review stuff to post. So let's play this while I do that. All right, I'll listen to the third one right now.
Radio Lab, we love fresh ideas.
Oops. And then if it piques my interest, I'll listen to the other two on my own.
Hey, this is Jad. Radio Lab is supported by IBM. For businesses around the world, today isn't a restart. It's a rethink. That's why they are partnering with IBM to change how they work. From supply...
Physics gang, Parsa? Are you in physics right now?
Hey, I'm Jad Abumrad.
I'm Robert Krulwich.
This is Radio Lab. We're going to keep going with our show on colors now with a story about, well...
Nice.
The color of the sky.
Most beautiful color.
Well,
Well, I think
Except
so.
red.
Nah.
Yeah, you got it.
It's a story that we find really surprising, frankly. And it comes from our producer, Tim Howard.
Yes.
Hello. Who heard it from...
So let me see, Ashi, if there's anything.
So Guy Deutscher is a linguist and a writer.
And
I came across his book.
called Through the Language Glass.
And he tells us one particular story in it that starts in, I think, 1858 with this guy, William Gladstone, who was an incredibly famous politician in England.
He was 4 times prime minister in the second half of the 19th century.
Every school kid knows who he is, even now. But there's one thing that not many people know about Gladstone.
Well, he was a Homer fanatic.
As the soldiers marched, the gleam went dazzling from the magnificent bronze all about through the upper air to the heavens.
He was a deeply religious man, and for him, the Iliad and Odyssey were almost like a second Bible.
Sipping the black blood, the tall shade perceived me and cried out sharply.
He read them over and over again throughout his life.
So he was into Homer.
Yes. And so early on in his career, Gladstone decided to write the definitive history of Homer.
This huge book, actually 3 books,
Thousands of pages.
where he discussed a whole range of issues relating to Homer and his world.
And here's the thing. As he was reading, doing his research and everything,
He made this very strange discovery. That the way Homer talks about color in the Iliad and the Odyssey is extremely odd.
It's odd?
Very, very odd.
How so?
To
Okay.
start with,
So Ahana, like, let's see. You're asking really good questions, and I think you're confused because, you're probably as confused as probably I am. So this idea of like, how is a benign tumor form, even if it shows density-dependent inhibition and things like that? Did I say that it forms that benign tumors have density-dependent inhibition? Okay, let's look into it. Wait, no, I think you might be confusing. Actually, 1 second. Let me see. Okay, so Ahana, I think you're confused because I did not say that benign tumors show density-dependent inhibition. I said, if I look at my slides here, I said normal cells show density-dependent inhibition. And remember, a benign tumor is not necessarily made of normal cells. It's made of cells that are dividing and proliferating faster than they should be. Right, so a normal cell does show density-independent inhibition. Cancer cells do not show that, but I also think cells in a benign tumor probably also don't show density-dependent inhibition because they're growing in to form a mass of cells. Right, so this shows normal cells, and then this is cancer cells. I will post these, Ashi. We just haven't finished yet, so. So Ahana, ultimately, I would say, when I talk about density dependent inhibition, it's more for normal cells. Now, in a tumor, tumors do not show density dependent inhibition, and tumors can either be benign or malignant. And the difference between a benign and a malignant tumor is not their density dependent inhibition, it's their ability to invade other tissues and spread and hoard resources. That would make it a malignant tumor versus a benign tumor. Yeah, they'll be posted by the weekend.
Uses extremely strange terms for colors of simple objects. The most famous one, perhaps, is
the wine dark sea.
The wine dark.
The wine dark sea.
It looks like wine.
Looks like wine.
Is it possibly like a poetic kind of thing?
That's what you would naturally think. But the other thing he calls wine color are oxen.
But it's more than just wine. Take the color violet, which to me and probably to you is like purple.
Light purple.
When Homer uses it.
He talks about the sheep.
The Cyclops rams were
in the Cyclops caves as having
a dark violet
wool.
But that's just fantasy. I mean.
But the other thing that he also says is violet is iron.
Iron.
So chew on that. Or how about this one? What is both the color of honey and the color of faces pale with fear?
No idea.
If you ask Homer, those are
green.
Green?
Green? For honey?
He didn't call his forests green. He didn't call his leaves green. I mean, it all seems to be wrong.
And this was totally puzzling to Gladstone.
Homer was Gladstone's absolute hero. So he found it difficult to understand or accept why someone who was so perceptive would use such defective terms, as Gladstone called it.
So he starts going
What's up,
through
Amrita?
the Iliad and the Odyssey again, page by page, and he counts how many times each color appears.
You mean like how many times he uses the word black or blue or whatever?
Yeah, and it only takes a couple pages for him to notice
the predominance of black and white.
That the term black.
Black days, black carrion flies under his black brows. Black, 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 black.
Occurred about 170 times in both books. Huh. White
arms, white cloud, the white sail, white ram.
Occurred about 100 times.
White.
But red?
A blood red serpent.
Only clocks in at about 13 times.
The red wine to the gods.
A big drop.
Yellow?
Dawn, in her yellow robe, rose.
Under 10 times. Green?
His teeth chatter in green fear.
Also under 10. And then Gladstone realizes something crazy. The color blue? 0 times.
What?
There's just no word that describes the color blue in any of Homer's poems.
He does not use the word blue at all?
No blue.
No blue.
Not even once?
Nope. So Gladstone thought, bizarre.
Yeah.
And he started looking in other classic Greek texts too. And there, he kept finding all of these strange uses of color.
Violet hair and things like that.
And after thinking about this for a long time,
Gladstone concluded that Homer was colorblind. But also that all the Greeks were colorblind.
Well, he thought all of them were colorblind?
Yes, that they saw the world in black and white. Maybe
Imagine
with a
an
touch of
entire.
red.
His thought was
Like,
that it
imagine
was
an entire
straining
like
to see these other
ethnicity
colors that
being
were kind of
colorblind.
just outside of their reach, and then their kid would
Seems a little bit like
inherit
not the,
that
like jumping to a conclusion.
effort, or their kid would just be a little bit
Gladstone.
better.
Oh, so that's how we got color.
So Homer Jr. would be able to see a little bit of yellow because Homer tried really hard to see yellow.
And then Homer the Third would be better than Homer the Second. And so
Yeah,
on.
and then this would happen again and again, every generation, down 3,000 years to the present day.
It just seemed the only, the only possible explanation.
That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
We know today, of course, that our color vision goes back probably about 30 million years.
To like when we were still in the jungle, climbing trees.
Exactly. So generally,
people mocked him.
No one took him seriously.
So then how do people explain the no blue in Homer thing?
Well, here the plot thickens. 10 years after Gladstone's Homer debacle, this other guy,
A German Jewish philologist called Lazarus Geiger.
Lazarus Geiger,
A German Jewish what, did he
a
say?
philologist, which I thought was a linguist. It basically means he studies ancient texts. He finds pretty much the same kind of weird stuff that Gladstone did, but he finds it not just in ancient Greek texts, but all over the place.
Sorry, this one?
He looked at the old Icelandic sagas,
Og svo sem hún sterk, þá mun hún brotna þó múspelsmegir fara.
ancient Chinese,
半江瑟瑟，半江
ancient Vedic hymns, the Bible,
זאת חוקת התורה, אשר ציווה אדוני לאמור.
and surprise, surprise, what did he find there?
No blue.
Even the Bible had no blue?
In the original Hebrew,
לכו נא ונבחכה.
it has no blue.
So wait, what's this room?
Right now we're in the public catalog room.
I actually went to the New York Public Library and talked to this librarian
Zur Entwicklungsgeschichte der Menschheit.
who can speak German,
So Entwicklung, Geschichte der Menschheit.
and we got out Geiger's book.
The development history of mankind.
Wait a second, I know this voice. Really?
Yeah, that's my girlfriend.
My name is Brooke Watkins, and I'm a librarian at the New York Public Library.
But
helped
she
me
is a
find
librarian.
some
Very
and
cool passages
she does speak
in
German.
Geiger's book.
Let's do it first. Let's do it in German.
Geiger has this amazing quotation
Okay, ich versuche.
about the Indian Vedic poems.
Diese Lieder aus mehr als 10,000 Versen bestehen.
And what does that say?
These hymns of more than 10,000 lines are brimming with descriptions of the heavens. Scarcely is there any subject evoked more frequently. The sun and reddening dawn's play of color, day and night, cloud and lightning, the air and the ether are unfolded before us and over in splendor and vivid fullness. But there's only one thing that no one would ever learn from those ancient songs who did not already know it, and that is that the sky is blue.
It gets weirder.
Hmm.
You ready?
Yeah.
Y'all ready for this?
I'm totally ready.
All right, because Geiger then wondered.
What's up, Gita?
all right, if there's no blue in any of these old texts, then when did blue come into these languages?
Yeah.
So he did this massive analysis to trace when each color term was first introduced to each language. And what he found was
The order at which languages seem to acquire these color terms is not entirely random.
first black and white. Every language has black and white. Then when they get their first color term,
red always comes first.
Always red.
After red, it's always yellow.
Really?
Yeah.
And then green, and blue only at the very end.
So black, white, red, green, yellow, and then blue?
Yeah.
And that's universal?
Well, as people discovered more and more languages, they found some exceptions. But a couple things held, even from Geiger. Out of these colors, red is always first, and blue
Gita,
is
you
always
said,
last.
can I explain what?
Well,
I mean, why would there be an order
exact-
at all? And why would blue always be last?
Well, here's where you get to the guessing part.
Okay.
Guy thinks it might have to do with a couple
I
of
think
things.
you
First,
mistyped.
in Homer's world, he wouldn't have actually been exposed to a lot of blue things.
Actually, if you think about it, blue is extremely rare in nature.
Blue foods?
No.
Blue animals? How about plants?
There's a few blue plants.
Like what?
Flowers that are really blue are extremely rare.
A lot of flowers that we think of as blue, they're actually
artificial flowers.
No worries.
We made them blue.
What exactly we need
genetically.
to
Yeah.
know about,
What about
the
blue
tragedy
eyes?
of
Blue
the
eyes
commons?
at the time were in short supply among the Greeks.
But here's where we get to Guy's main point.
Good question.
He says you don't really need a word for a color until you can make that color reliably. And the reason that red might have been first is that red
is apparently one of the easiest to produce.
So
you can just take a
what
dry
exactly
piece
do
of
you know
red
about
clay.
tragedy? So
and can
basically,
use
you
it as a
should
crayon,
know.
which is why paint's made out of oak.
You should know that the tragedy of the commons is an issue that you just kind of know, first of all, like its definition, right? Which is when a publicly available resource that's open access to multiple people and is unregulated, what's going to happen is people are going to overuse it in ways that will degrade or deplete that resource over time. Now, how do you connect it to certain things? You should know that, like, some examples of this in terms of what we've talked about in Unit 5 so far with, like, the exploitation of forests, and land for agriculture, right? So if everyone is, growing crops on the land, or everyone is raising livestock, or everyone is cutting down the trees, that resource is going to be depleted over time because there's no regulation and no communication, and everyone is going to use it for their own ends, and that leads to a slow but sure process of degradation. And so that is the tragedy of a common resource, tragedy of the commons. Beyond that, you don't really need to know much more. So from a very basic standpoint. Does that make sense? No problem, Geeta. Thanks for stopping in. If you have any other questions, just let me know. I'll be here. Okay, so far we're about halfway through this Radiolab thing, and the takeaway is, so far, names and language that we use to describe colors don't come about in a predictable fashion, because as people get better at making colors, like artificially, we start to name them, and it turns out that black and white are easy to make, so those get names first, and then then red, then yellow, then da-da-da-da, because they're easier to make, maybe due to like pigments in the environment or something like that. So the idea would be that it's red is an easier color to synthesize / create than something like blue, which is not something I knew. Neil, do we need to turn in? No. So there's nothing to turn in. I posted the assignment on Schoology as a reminder to record your food over 24 hours. Just have your food log available in class. Ahana, if lipids and proteins don't contain glucose, how do they make ATP? Good question. Ahana, you ask, you're always the... Ahana, by the way, I appreciate the questions that you ask in class. You're always the one that asks the pressing questions, the follow-up questions. So to answer that question in particular, how do lipids and proteins make ATP if they don't contain glucose, you would have to dive into the details of cellular respiration and like the different parts of it. So with cellular respiration, glucose is the molecule that starts the process, right? Now, lipids and proteins can enter the process of cellular respiration at a point further along after the glucose stage. So, for example, you can convert lipids and proteins into other molecules that can enter cellular respiration at different steps. So, like, let's just kind of like look this up real quick. Maybe they'll have a quick diagram that shows the metabolic pathway. This good one. Yeah, so here's a good one. Whoa, that's huge. So what you see here is the process. This whole thing is cellular respiration. So it starts out with glucose, right? And this would come from carbohydrates. Now, it turns out that our lipids, fats, when we break them down into their subunits, glycerol and fatty acids, they can enter in at these different stages of cellular respiration and eventually make ATP, right? So, and again, we didn't learn the details of cellular respiration. This is something that you might dive into if you take AP Bio, but just know that fats, things like lipids, can enter into cellular respiration at different stages along the way. And then you can see amino acids can enter in at these different points and get converted to different molecules like acetyl-CoA and pyruvate. These are names of molecules that glucose is broken down into along the way of generating ATP. So that's the gist of that.
60,000 years. And blue? Blue is the hardest of all. For thousands of years, no one had it.
One exception, the Egyptians.
The Egyptians. And they, and only they.
Egyptians. The
had their own
Egyptians
word
are
for
always
blue.
like more advanced.
So that's it?
Even
That's
like
your answer?
architecturally,
Yeah.
the pyramids, like no one really knows how
it's
they
all-
built
no
those
blue
things.
dyes, no
way
blue
ahead of their
words.
time.
That's not interesting?
I want more than that.
What do you mean more?
I don't know, something more to say than just it's about
All right, well-
dyes.
Here you go. As I was calling around, I ran into something that made me think a little differently about Gladstone's whole theory of color blindness. Called this guy named Jules Davidoff.
Professor of neuropsychology, London University.
And a few years back, he got interested in this particular tribe in Namibia called the Himba.
The Himba. Like many languages in the world, they don't have a different word for blue.
You might think of them as like a very poor stand-in for Homer.
All right.
And to make a long story short, Jules went to Namibia. He sat down with a bunch of members of the Himba tribe, whipped out a laptop, and showed them 12 colored squares.
All identical except for one.
And there's actually some really cool video footage of his research assistant doing this. And he asked him, very simply,
which one is different?
Now, you look at this and you see that 11 of these squares are green.
A colour we would call green.
Very green. The other one is blue. This blue one, it's shouting. It's like, hey, I'm blue. Over here, I'm blue.
It's easy enough for us to do.
It's a no-brainer. But the Himba, who don't have a separate word for blue in their language,
They find this distinction a little difficult.
when they stare at this screen, they just stare and stare.
They don't see the difference
They
between
don't
the blue and the
see it.
green?
No.
Well, is there something wrong with their eyes?
No, definitely not. We completely.
Sorry, I'm
rule
just
that
working
out.
on
They
a
don't
review
see
stuff,
colour,
just that's
and
why I'm not.
individual colours different.
But then, wait.
It's so easy to say that they're seeing different colours to us, and they're not.
Well, then how does he explain it?
Okay. When we decide to put colours together in a group,
And then give those colors a word, like blue.
something happens.
He says what happens is that now that there's a category for that thing, the thing in the category jumps out. It gets louder and louder to your eyes. The category actually feeds back on your perception, so you notice it more.
You're saying that having the word for blue unlocks your ability to see blue?
I mean, that's how it feels to me, and Jules says...
No, it's not quite that.
He says without the word, you're still seeing the blue, no matter what. You're just not, noticing it. Your eyes are just kind of glossing right over it.
So you don't see it.
It's hard. It's harder to spot, says Jules.
But whatever, I don't quite understand that difference.
Ashi,
Blue would
I don't
not
know
jump
if I have
out
a
and
Quizlet.
say high five the way it does with us.
But if it doesn't jump out to that extent,
I'm looking at some of my
then
review material. I don't see
this
any
is starting
Quizlets.
to sound very Gladstone-y to me. I mean, maybe he was a little right. Like, because if Homer had no word for blue and the word somehow enables the blueness of the blue, then maybe his world was less blue than it would be for us. I mean, maybe the blue went through his eyes in the same way, but it perhaps didn't get into his mind in the same way.
Yeah, blue didn't matter.
Wait a second. Do you know where this breaks down?
Where?
The sky. I mean, you look up and there's the bluest blue in the world, and it's right there above our heads. It's been there since the dawn of time. So why wouldn't blue...
Is this going to get into, I'm going to guess where this is going to go. Is this going to get into this idea that, like, language comes before concepts or something like that? Because I do know that if you don't have a term for something, it's not as easy for you to identify it. Like, language is actually, like, a very fundamental aspect of understanding the world. That's my guess. Is this going to go that route?
Matter more? I mean, why wouldn't it be the first color instead of the last?
Well, that's what I thought too, and I asked Guy about that. Yeah, why is the sky blue? Is the
Just finish
the
that
first
part?
question
Did I miss
that
it?
you always think?
Allegedly, the first question that all children ask.
Yeah.
But I wanted to see how obvious or striking this blueness of the sky is. So I decided to make an experiment.
Guy has a very young daughter.
About 18 months. She was learning to speak.
What's her name?
I'm going to finish
Alma.
it out real
I
quick.
talked a lot about
It's the
colors
last couple
with
minutes.
Alma and taught her all the colors, including blue. We would play all these games that dads play with their children.
You know, pointing at objects.
I would point at a blue object and ask her, what's the color of this? She would say boo. Boo for blue.
Oh, okay. Soon enough, Alma was a total pro. She could identify any color.
Show me the red object, show me the this. And
Right.
the only thing I didn't do, and I asked my wife not to do, was ever mention that the sky was blue. That was the setup.
So one day, Guy and Alma were taking a stroll, and they're practicing the colors.
What's this tree? What's this? What's this? And then I pointed at the sky and said, what color is that? And she wouldn't give me any answer.
Huh.
Although she just a second before was happily telling me that something was blue on red or green. She just looked up and looked at me incomprehendingly. Sort of, what are you talking about?
She thought you were kidding?
I think she didn't understand what I was on about.
Huh.
In retrospect, there was no object there. There was nothing with color for her.
You're just pointing into the void, basically.
Pointing into nothingness. So she wouldn't say anything.
But Guy kept asking every single time they went
Of
out.
course, I would do it only when the sky was blue.
And she would never answer him. And this went on for 2 months.
And then finally, she did consent to give me a color name, but it wasn't blue, it was white. For a few times she said white, and then finally, after a month and a half or 2 more months, she said blue for the first time.
Wow.
But even then, it wasn't consistently blue. So she said once blue, no white, no blue.
Did she eventually decide, though? You know what, Dad, it is blue.
Well, no, she never said it this way. But eventually, when I asked, it became consistently blue. So she just would say blue.
Okay.
This was, for me, really the point where I could, convince myself, or convince at least my heart, that the sort of allegedly perfect example of blue is
Not so perfect.
So, for Homer, who, never ever probably saw a blue object except the sky and the sea, never had a dad who sort of went on about blue objects and asking what the color of the sky was. The fact that he didn't lose sleep over it doesn't seem so strange anymore.
It's now that I've heard this, I'm a little ruining the moment when Alma decided the sky was blue. Let her have whatever color she wants it to be. It doesn't have to be blue.
Weirdly, then, color is a loss of innocence.
Yeah.
It's like having something fixed that for a while is just between you and your frenzied heart, just...
And the sky has many colors, truthfully. On the other hand, though, I'm disagreeing with myself now. If we all agree the sky is blue, then that's something we can share, and she can share.
And then she's in conversation.
And then eventually she'll understand, this kind of blue.
Yeah, there aren't blue moons, but you know what it feels like.
Oh yeah.
It's not a happy night.
Our guardian star lost all his glow.
Ashi, practice test is usually going to be a little bit less.
He lost all his glitter.
So practice tests are always, the way, at least in the case, the way that I do it, they're always going to be more like broad. So for example, like this one that I'm just editing right now before I post into the review material is like, right, it's asking more broad questions. It's not multiple choice. It's asking you to like think about topics. So it's not very specific. The question is not like pointing you at a specific thing. So it's hard to compare them. And so like, I would say the way to think about a practice test is it's pointing you in the direction of things you need to know. It's not as much giving you mimicking the kind of questions you would see on an actual test. So the word practice test might not be the best term to use for something like this. Maybe something more like review guide or study questions, that kind of thing. I mean, it's easier because it lets you answer to the level you know, but the practice test is easier in that regard, but it's harder because it's more open-ended. So it's kind of a mix. Yeah, it's more like a study guide. problem is this was made by, I believe, a TA. And so some of the questions are not worded very well. So I'm trying to edit some of this to make it a little bit better. So basically,
I think I just took red just to be contrary. I'm trying to think what actually my favorite color is. I don't really know.
When you say you love me, then prove it by going out on the slide, proving your love isn't true.
Is this
The Sound and Vision Raya Brass Band with Painted Black, Nico Muley with Big...
Oh yeah, now it's just the credits.
Well, that's what I thought too, and I asked Guy about that. Yeah, why is the sky blue? Is the first question
It's
that you always think.
allegedly the first question that all children ask.
Yeah.
But I wanted to see how obvious.
Not.
Well, then how does he explain it?
Okay. When we decide to put colours together in a group,
And then give those colors a word.
All right, Ashi,
like
have
blue.
a good night.
something happens.
He says what happens is that now that there's a category for that thing, the thing in the category jumps out. It gets louder and louder to your eyes. The category actually feeds back on your perception, so you notice it more.
You're saying that having the word for blue unlocks your ability to see blue?
I mean, that's how it feels to me, and Jules says...
No, it's not quite that.
He says without the word, you're still seeing the blue, no matter what. You're just not, noticing it. Your eyes are just kind of glossing right over it.
So you don't see it.
Well, it's like it's not that you don't see it. It's not that you're like, it's not being emphasized, right? It's like this idea that if you don't have a term for something, or if you don't have language for something, it's like it doesn't stand out to you as something to be recognized, maybe, or like to be noticed, right? It's just, oh, it exists, but no one's like pointed it out directly to you. So it's not something that you like classify and can articulate very well. It's kind of like when you're in a room, right? And there's like a sound, like a clicking, like let's say a clock. You might not notice it, but if someone points it out to you, then suddenly you notice it. Daphne, just like if you don't know someone, I won't remember them, but if I see my friend, I'll remember that I saw them. Maybe kind of. $10.
But a couple things held, even from Geiger. Out of these colors, red is always first, and blue is always...
Be in order at all, and why would blue always be last?
Well, here's where you get to the guessing part.
Okay.
Guy thinks it might have to do with a couple of things. First, in Homer's world, he wouldn't have actually been exposed to a lot of blue things.
Actually, if you think about it, blue is extremely rare in nature.
Blue foods?
No.
Blue animals? How about plants?
Water?
There's a few blue plants.
But
Like
that's not blue per
Flowers
se.
that are really blue are extremely rare.
A lot of flowers that we think of as blue, they're actually...
Artificial flowers.
We made them blue.
Genetically, you mean?
Yeah.
What about blue eyes?
Blue eyes at the time were in short supply among the Greeks.
But here's where we get to Guy's main point. He says you don't really need a word for a color.
Oh, sorry,
until you
Ahana.
can make that color.
1 second. If normal cells show anchorage dependence, why doesn't everything just stick together? doesn't everything just stick together? Everything does stick together, right? Like your body, everything is sort of stuck to itself. Like your skin is sort of stuck to its other skin, and it's also stuck to the layers of skin below it, which is stuck to the fat layer below it, which is stuck to the muscle, which is stuck to the bone. Everything is sort of adhered together, right? If that, like, what that's saying is that like one of my skin cells couldn't like suddenly like detach and go into the layer of muscle and then get into the blood and go somewhere, where like cancer cells, they will oftentimes detach from their location, right? No longer be anchored to that spot and go somewhere else. But that doesn't happen with your skin cells and your muscle cells or any other cell. Blood flows though. Well, blood is blood might be an exception to that. So blood is a unique substance where it's meant to sort of move around the body because it has to deliver nutrients. Right? So that would be like maybe one exception, is that like red blood cells and white blood cells, they do kind of not show anchorage dependence.
Reliably. And the reason that red might have been first is that red
is apparently one of the easiest to produce.
You can just take a dried piece of red clay
Yeah, I
and you
already
can
heard
use it
this.
as a crayon.
The Egyptians.
Like, it's all, no blue dyes, no blue words.
That's not interesting.
Yes, Sid, every cell has the same genome. Yep. But the food we eat is basically cells, though. That is true, Ahana. Yeah, every food that you eat is cells, made of cells, because it's either plants or animals, which are organisms, which made our cells. Actually, that's not completely true. Like if you eat like bread, like if you eat like straight sugar, that's not cells. That's just pure sugar. But like if it's a whole food, not a processed food, it's going to be made of cells for the most part, unless you're eating like honey or there's instances in nature of things that are not cells. So why does it not stick then? What do you mean does it not stick? Because those cells are no longer alive, right? You've eaten them and you've chewed them up and destroyed them in your mouth, and so they're no longer carrying out their normal function of being a cell. They're sticking to each other, right? So if I have like a steak, like all of the cells that make up the muscle of that steak are all anchored to each other, right? And are dependent on being anchored to that tissue. When I eat that, it's not going to anchor to me because those cells are dependent upon anchoring to the same tissue that they're part of, and it's not my mouth, so it's not going to stick to my mouth or anything like that. When you deactivate a gene, does it mean you get rid of it? No, you don't get rid of the gene. You just turn. It's like an on-off switch, right? So like I have a light in my room. If I turn the light off, the light doesn't go away. It's just deactivated. So the gene is still there. It just is no longer active. And then it can potentially be turned on again. Yeah, Daphne, I don't know. I'm not sure if it's this idea. I'm trying to get to the bottom of this so I can understand it. Well, because I do know this idea that language forms the basis of our understanding. If we don't have words for things, we know that they're there, but it's more of like an intuition. It's more of like an intuitive thing where it's sort of like it's there, you see it, you understand that it's there, but you don't like, there's something by naming something that like brings it into our like processing and maybe brings it out of like a sort of like a subconscious understanding more to like a conscious level.
I want more than that.
What do you mean more?
I don't know, something more to say than just it's about
All right,
eyes.
Here you go. As I was calling around, I ran into something that made me
Like you literally don't understand it's there. So like here, I have a mug, right? You can kind of see that it's got 3 layers. So if I didn't have a name for, let's say, this middle layer, this brown layer, would I just look at this mug and be like, oh, it's got 2 distinct layers? Because I wouldn't see that middle third layer. Or would I see it, but I would sort of like not really understand that it's distinct? Okay, let's listen.
That's not interesting.
I want more than that.
What do you mean more?
I don't know, something more to say than just it's about
All right, well-
eyes.
Here you go. As I was calling around, I ran into something that made me think
Hello, is that Tim?
a little differently about Gladstone's whole theory of color blindness. Called this guy named Jules Davidoff.
Professor of neuropsychology, London University.
And a few years back, he got interested in this particular tribe in Namibia called the Himba.
Himba. Like many languages in the world, they don't have a different word for blue.
You might think of them as like a very poor stand-in for Homer.
All right.
And to make a long story short, Jules went to Namibia. He sat down with a bunch of members of the Himba tribe, whipped out a laptop, and showed them 12 colored squares.
All identical except for one.
And there's actually some really cool video footage of his research assistant doing this. And he asked him, very simply,
which one is different?
Now, you look at this and you see that 11 of these squares are green.
A colour we would call green.
Very green. The other one is blue. This blue one, it's shouting. It's like, hey, I'm blue. Over here, I'm blue.
It's easy enough for us to do.
It's a no-brainer. But the Himba, who don't have a separate word for blue in their language,
They find this distinction a little difficult.
when they stare at this screen, they just stare and stare.
They don't see the difference
They
between the
don't
blue and the
see it.
green?
No.
Well, is there something wrong with their eyes?
No, definitely not. We completely rule that out. They don't see colour and individual colours differently.
But then, wait.
It's so easy to say that they're seeing different colours to us, and they're not.
Well, then how does he explain it?
Okay. When we decide to put colours together in a group,
And then give those colors a word, like blue.
something happens.
He says what happens is that now that there's a category for that thing, the thing in the category jumps out. It gets louder and louder to your eyes. The category actually feeds back on your perception, so you notice it more.
You're saying that having the word for blue unlocks your ability to see blue?
I mean, that's how it feels to me, and Jules says...
No, it's not quite that.
He says without the word, you're still seeing the blue, no matter what.
Right.
You're just not, noticing it.
So you see it, you just don't notice it. Again, it's like something that's not being pointed out to you very clearly. If I hit 1,000 subs, you can monetize. Maybe. But you know, I'm not interested in monetizing right now. That's not. It'd be interesting to see what would happen with that. I don't want ads though. I don't want you guys to get ads. I don't think Darsh, that doesn't sound like what they were saying. It doesn't sound like they were seeing green instead of blue. So here's the question: what we would need to know. So, okay, maybe I missed it. What did they say? What was the question they asked them?
Not.
Well, then how does he explain it?
Okay. When we decide to put colours together in a group,
And then give those colors a word, like blue.
something happens.
He says what happens is that now that there's a category for that thing, people who don't have a separate word
They don't have which one.
called the Himba.
Okay.
Like many languages in the world, they don't have a different word for blue.
You might think of them as like a very poor stand-in for Homer.
All right.
And to make a long story short, Jules went to Namibia. He sat down with a bunch of members of the Himba tribe, whipped out a laptop, and showed them 12 colored squares.
Okay.
All identical except for one.
And there's actually some really cool video footage of his research assistant doing this. And he asked him, very simply,
Which one is different?
Wait,
Now,
wait.
you look at
12 colored squares. One was blue and the rest were green.
And to make a long story short, Jules went to Namibia. He sat down with a bunch of members of the Himba tribe, whipped out a laptop, and showed them 12 colored squares.
All identical except for one.
Okay.
And there's actually some really cool video footage of his research assistant doing this. And he asked him, Very simply.
which one is different.
Which one was different, and they couldn't say.
Now, you look at this and you see that 11 of these squares are green.
A color we would call green.
Very green. The other one...
So maybe it's like when you say which one is different, the word different is relatively broad. So maybe they're not noticing, they're like looking at the squares and they're looking at all of these different characteristics of the squares. Like, well, oh, they're all squares, so they're all the same size, the same shape, they have the same edges and angles, but they're not like picking up like that because blue is not a color that they have a word for. Like they're not recognizing that that is a difference between them. Between that one particular square and the rest. It seems to me like it's just a matter of language being an important tool for us to differentiate between things in the world. Which is kind of crazy. Which is very interesting and very... it's interesting to an extent because a lot of times when we talk about... We talk about stuff, like... A lot of stuff like... if you start like digging down into like philosophical things and getting deep into it, like a lot of times you like bottom out with like language as the thing that's the issue. Yeah, it's really weird. I gotta look more into some stuff about language. Because language is a really crazy part of how we understand the world, right? So it kind of by default, it's like if you don't have words for things, you can't even understand them. And by having more words, it maybe unlocks your understanding of the world more. Which is kind of the way, it's kind of backwards to what we were used to thinking. Right, by giving them a name, it makes it so that they are now something to be identified as separate from the rest of the world. I mean, I'm sure we also give babies names just from a sheer, like, practical point of view. Whereas if, like, all of a sudden everybody is unnamed, it becomes like, wait, who's that? Oh, it's that one person that's different from that person because they have this thing. Yeah, the Minecraft music is nice. That was interesting, though. Adarsh, I appreciate that, but it makes me now curious to jump more into I want to learn more about like the fundamental language stuff, like that's something I need to look into a little bit more. Like how knowledge is limited by your language. Oh yeah, it's not copyrighted. That's cool. do like the Minecraft music. I also like that the Minecraft music doesn't play non-stop, so that when it comes on, like, you really notice it, and it feels kind of like a nice moment. It's almost like a movie score, you know, like, you know, like in movies, sometimes you'll like, the music will be like too much the entire movie, it's like less impactful, but like when they time the music correctly and it comes at certain times, it's like really has a huge effect. I think Minecraft kind of, I like that sense of where they don't overuse the music. It's more than that, because the difference between giving a name and making the act of giving the name a religiously important function. The act of giving a name. Bye, Aria. Have a good night. Pink Panther. I don't think I've... Are you talking about the new Pink Panthers or the old ones? It's more than just like practical. It's practical too, but as culture evolves, they understand at a cultural level the importance of these functions. These functions... maybe. I wonder. I don't know if it's like a explicit on, like, I don't know if you asked an individual person about naming that they would be able to articulate at the level that you're talking. I don't think a person would be like, oh yeah, I understand that language is a fundamental way that we understand the world and differentiate things in the world, and without language we wouldn't, you know, we wouldn't be able to have the, like, differentiate between things. Like, they would just be like, well, we give names because it helps us know who people are, like, yeah, you know. I gotta think about what you're saying, Adarsh. I don't even know. You're saying... ideas and thoughts can exist at a group level while not being fully comprehended by any nodes in the social group. Right. So they're like at a layer above the individual. It's like I mean, this is true of any group, right? Like, so for example, we all do things that we don't necessarily understand, but we do them because, you know, a matter of culture, a matter of habit, a matter of learning, etc. So what you're saying is that, like, you're looking at it, you're trying to like step back from the individual level and like analyze it from like a groupish level. Well, originally a meme is, I guess you're kind of right with the idea of a meme. Like a meme is any idea, is just a cultural, is a gene at the cultural level, right? Like that's where the word meme came from. When I think it was Richard Dawkins that coined that word back in the 70s with his book, The Selfish Gene. Or no, not The Selfish Gene. I don't know. It was some book back in the 70s where he coined this word meme as a way to describe ideas that are passed on and that evolve and change, just like genes are pass on from one individual to the next and evolve and change via natural selection. But he was saying there's a similar mechanism at work in cultural ideas like memes. So like religion is a meme, right? It's like one of the original kind of meme, but so is, you know, different forms of language can be a meme. Any cultural idea is a meme, right? And it gets passed on, and from as it progresses through the society, it changes and it becomes different from one generation to the next or one culture to the next. Ahana, do both lactic acid fermentation and alcoholic fermentation? Yes, they both produce, I believe so. Actually, don't quote me on that. I believe so. I believe they both only produce 2 ATP. I believe so. Actually, let's look that up. Oh yeah. Yep. Because with lactic acid fermentation, alcoholic fermentation in general, so both types, only goes through cellular respiration through that first part called glycolysis, and that only makes 2 ATP, and it can't go through the rest. So. Like when communism or violent nationalism possesses a culture because their social functions override their individual psychological functions, right? They aren't thinking, they're shouting and raging in a crowd. Yeah, I don't know. Let me think. Is that the same thing as... So like mob mentality? Is that what you're getting at? I don't know. Is mob mentality a meme? I don't know if I would describe that as a meme necessarily. But it is sort of a group think issue, because humans are like kind of tribal by nature, right? So we just want to like be part of a group and abide by group norms. And if that's what the group is doing, and if it's like an us versus them kind of thing, then it makes sense to sort of get out your pitchforks with everybody else. And maybe not critically think it, because maybe what people are screaming about isn't like necessarily rational or true, but because we're so groupish, we tend to be like, well, I'd rather just be like technically wrong, but in with the group than technically right and outcasted, because like that's more of truth is less valuable than being in a group for social animals like humans and cultural animals like humans. I mean, I talked about this. Like, there was a stream a while ago. I don't know if you were here, where I talked about, we watched those videos where those social psychology videos where you have an experiment where you have whatever, like 4 or 5 people in an elevator standing the wrong way, and then you have a participant get in, and the participant overwhelmingly always just sort of goes with the group, even though they know that that's not the right direction to face. They just do it anyway because it's like, that's the mentality. You don't want to be the weird one that's not doing what everyone else is doing, even if like deep down you kind of know that it's not right. Parts of your IG page. It's funny to me how the word meme, which was like this sort of very technical term that was described in a very like sort of like prestigious / intellectual way in a book in the 70s, has now become synonymous with some very basic comic-y kind of stuff. It's kind of interesting. But the term is not used wrong. I mean, when we talk about, memes, the kinds that we're thinking about, it's a good word for it, because they are templates, right? Like, you take the template and people pass it around and it gets slowly modified and becomes slightly different, and it's a very cultural thing. It's more like an ideology possesses and functions in a certain way, like genes behave, but the nodes in the society don't understand how that ideology is working. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Right, like ants in a hive don't know that what they're necessarily doing in terms of like the entirety of the hive. Like their role is sort of something that they just do. So are you trying to make the claim that people in an ideology, so if I'm following through with your cell analogy here, correct me if I'm wrong, are you saying that individual people are like cells and the ideology is like the organism, insofar as the people are carrying out the functions of... Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're saying the ideology is the thing that's controlling the people? Let me think about that. Well, when you say pathological, you're implying like some sort of malfunction, some sort of harm or danger, right? So So here's the problem with your analogy that it kind of breaks down, though. So, for example, in an organism, if a cell is cancerous, we would say it's no longer conforming to the organism's main, the benefit, the health of the entirety of the organism. So it is what we would say you have a pathology. You have a pathology of cancer. It is that those cells are sort of off the rails. They're no longer functioning correctly, and that would be akin to maybe an individual member in an ideology sort of going against the ideology and doing things that are not prescribed or are particularly beneficial for the propagation of that idea in the culture, which means maybe they no longer like take it for granted and they like question it. But to say like an entire ideology is a pathology wouldn't really work, because the ideology is the organism. Like an organism itself cannot be pathological. Something within the organism has to be pathological. Ahana, doesn't a cellular respiration process basically flip the products and the reactants of photosynthesis with an extra ATP? Doesn't cellular respiration process basically flip the products? Oh, with an extra ATP. Yeah, so basically the products are the products of photosynthesis are the reactants of cellular respiration. Yeah, they're flipped. Now it's actually 32 ATP technically. It's not just one ATP. Just to be clear. So no, the society is the organism and the ideology is the gene. Oh, okay. So you're saying that the ideology is okay. Oh, okay. Now I see where we're going with this. Okay, so let me I'm going to question you on this because we might have a disagreement. I want to see where you're going with this. So by that reason, so you're saying, okay, society. Now keep in mind, are you saying society, modern day society, aka like every person on earth, or are you saying like individual societies? Because I would argue that we haven't really reached a global society yet. I mean, kind of, but not like 100%. Okay, so societies. Okay, so like individual cultures, let's say, right? But what was this whole thing about communism that you said before? You said something like communism would be like I can't go back. I can't see. I think it's passed in the chat. You said communism is like would be the ideology that would be a pathological meme. But like how can you say that communism is pathological but capitalism isn't? Like where's that judgment of which one's that's gravel. Which one's like why is one meme pathological and bad and one okay, yeah, but communism infects the population, but so does Christianity, so does Hinduism, so does any ideology. Like, but how do you distinguish one as being bad, quote unquote, for the society, and one being good? You're going beyond simply stating that something is a meme, and now you're going into saying some memes are bad and some memes are good. But where are you coming from? Like how do you have that moral ground to sort of make those claims? I'm assuming you're probably basing it off of historical evidence, their effect in the world. So you're arguing that the only problem I have with your train of thought here is that it's very easy to use your train of thought to rationalize eradication of certain cultures because they are not good for society, right? Or that they are quote unquote pathological. Well, capitalism didn't, right? Not yet. I mean, capitalism hasn't been around for that long. I mean, we're currently seeing some minor protests and revolts, right, with capitalism right now, like the wealth inequality that we see that's generated in a capitalistic society like we have. It's not necessarily true, I would say, that capitalism is somehow unique or somehow immune to negative societal consequences, because I think we're seeing some of those things. It is true that, communism in the past has had issues, but I would argue that there is no such thing as a perfect meme, a perfect ideology. Yes, more diamond. Right? Like, here's the thing, like, there is no, like, the question of, like, is there a utopia? Is there a perfect meme? Is there a perfect ideology? I gotta make more. I should have made all right. Enchantments. Nathan, I need to get more paper. Well, Adarsh, no, so you say like certain cultures are bad, like the Taliban, for instance? Well, the Taliban is not bad. The Taliban does exactly what they want to do. Like the Taliban is propagating perfectly well for that society, like that group. Now, is it bad for other groups? Sure. But again, that's relative, right? So when you say bad and good, it's bad for other groups, good for their group, right? So for example, like the Taliban, they accomplished their goals. So the question is like, how can you stand outside of human culture to make a judgment about individual cultures in relationship to humans as a whole if you yourself are part of a particular culture? Right? If you know what I'm saying? I know, right? Parts of this happened before. I was like, it seems like the game is... But I only have one diamond. I don't have enough diamonds to make another pickaxe. Neil, you can get hella books in strongholds. Okay, so Neil, problem is I've gone to a stronghold and I get wrecked. I need to get enchantments. It's a catch-22. I can't really get the books in the stronghold until I have good enchantments to be able to get into the stronghold. So I got to get initial books to get my enchantments, to get more books. Darsh, you're not talking about consequences for the economics. I said communism as a historical example, something that controlled populations group without the people understanding what it's doing. Sure, okay. Okay, I don't disagree with you. I think my only point of contention would be like if you start trying to get into the problem is that if once you get to the level of like of trying to talk about ideologies as good and bad, it becomes very relativistic. Right? So for example, an ideology is good. Oh, shoot. I gotta sleep, huh? That's what that means. Ideology is good if it propagates itself and it stays around, right? So, for example, right now, what's the largest religion on earth, right? Is Christianity? I think Christianity is number one, right? Like, we can take that as a meme, right? As an ideology, as a religion. That's clearly a very successful meme. It's a very successful ideology, right? So it's successful for itself, but how can you say is it good or bad in relation to what? That's where it gets weird. You have to have some sort of way of being objectively measuring whether an ideology is good or bad. And when you start to try and come up with measurements for that, things get a little weird, because you have to put some sort of subjective value on certain measurements. Does that make sense? Sorry, Ahana. Is cellular respiration how the plant gets oxygen for its daily functions, and also other than for cellular respiration? What other things is the plant doctor for? Oh yeah, so for plants, the oxygen that they get, they get. I don't believe they don't get enough oxygen from their photosynthesis to completely power their cellular respiration. So as far as I understand, they do need to intake some oxygen through their stomata as well, in addition to the stomata that they release from photosynthesis. So they need extra. And is it used for anything other than cellular respiration? I don't believe so. I do not think so. I think plants only use oxygen for cellular respiration. So I got my wheat. I need to sleep, but it's not nighttime, so I can't sleep yet. This thing will not leave me alone right until I sleep. Let's see. Get all this iron. Selected for does not equal good. No, I like I said, I agree. I don't good. I think we're gonna get down to like a good and bad. Like these are subjective terms. There's no such thing as like an objectively good thing and an objectively bad thing. Like I don't think morality is objective. I think morality is subjective. I can kill it for phantom membrane. Is it worth it? Are they easy to kill? It's actually not that big. It's pretty small. You don't see why we can't criticize another culture from within a different one when you can easily criticize your own culture too. Yeah, no, I'm not saying you can't criticize other cultures. What I'm saying is that your criticism is subjective. It's subjective criticism. Like you're not coming from a completely objective place of criticism. Does that make sense? Phantom membrane. What's phantom membrane for? Phantom membrane. I'm going to put this in here in my random stuff. To heal, probably won't be useful for a while. Okay, I'll just stash it then. Yeah, I don't know what an elytra is, or elytra. Communism is a horrible economic theory. Not saying capitalism might not have some problems, but I was simply talking the ideological aspect that is not. Yeah, I don't know enough about the ins and outs of economic theory to talk the differences between communism and capitalism. That's like not my area of strength. I think I was more just trying to get at the idea that that's what I was going to do. That you got to be careful, I think, when you use the word good and bad or moral and immoral, because these are terms that are subjective, right? So for example, adultery is considered immoral, right, in certain cultures. But can you really say that it's immoral from an objective standpoint, like speaking from a standpoint outside of sort of humanism? Ahana, I am factory farming, I know, and I need to expand this because the conditions here are getting pretty rough. But I need to make a lot of books, so I need all this leather. Or feed these calves. Elytra is a pair of flying wings that you can get in End Dimension. Oh, nice. That's actually really good. So you don't have to worry about fall damage, and you can fly? That's pretty good. I have so much wheat parsa that I'm not necessarily super worried about wasting it on feeding them. I heard it just helps their growth, but you're right, I probably don't need to like worry about their growth too much. I need to make more fence posts. Fence. Sticks and planks. Okay. That's it? 15? Oh, I don't have enough sticks. Let's do... What the heck? How? How did that just appear in my house? How dare it? The problem with postmodern subjectivity for saying something is good or bad is that there are very finite and constrained set of definitions that are practical and work to better society. I would say the shooting of dissidents is not good, nor is tyranny, especially considering tyranny is archetype present in our psychological cultures, which means some I'm not 100% sure where I feel like you're going down. I'm not sure some of the terms you're using there. I feel like you're using some Jordan Peterson jargon with like tyrannical father and archetype. I know that's sort of his vernacular. But I kind of want to know what you mean in your own words. It'll help me like understand where you're coming from. Like, how would you process what that means in your own sort of like your own kind of language? Oh, I need to get that hoe so I can get some. Yeah, I would say the one thing to just be a little careful about, Adarsh, is try to. Don't get too like stuck on speaking or copying a way somebody talks or a way that people explain things, because it sort of it kind of narrows your own ability to sort of interpret things, and you kind of everything gets interpreted through a certain lens. I know it's like it happens though. Like I know like when I do it sometimes too. Like when you you know, someone makes sense to you, and like the things they say make sense, and they're like they speak well and they articulate things, and it's very clear. Like it's easy to just sort of like copy that template. I do that. I've done that, but I think especially when you're younger, like you mirror people that you consider like maybe role models, or that have sort of you like some of the things they say, or that make sense to you. But I always encourage try not fall too deep into that. What happened here? Why did this fence break? Doesn't make any sense. I can't die though, because I can't lose these levels. Oh my god. Okay, this is getting out of hand here. Why is there creepers out at this time? Okay. Okay, now how do I get this cow? Get out of here, dude. Is this cow ever gonna... Alright, I'm sorry. If you're not gonna get out of there, you're gonna get buried alive. Okay, I'm just gonna sleep because I can't deal with these phantoms right now. How dare you, Ohana? Good, Adarsh. I'm glad. I'm glad. No, I get where you're coming from. It's nice to find somebody who says things in a way that like resonates with you and like clarifies things that you kind of had like an intuition about, and then now it's put into words. You're like, oh, this is the way this makes sense to me. I get it. That makes sense. But also, you gotta always have to be aware, like, yeah, exactly. You don't want to fall into that sort of just lack of questioning. It's always a good idea to sort of question things, because it no one is infallible, right? Ideas are just ideas. Okay, so let's okay, I'm trying to read your thing. Basically, psychology fades into biology, and the more fundamental something in psych is, the more biologically rooted it is. Archetypes are like super fundamental pillars that can't move, and they... Okay, yeah, no, I think, there's some truth to that. Psychology fades into biology. Psychology fades into biology. Man, all my cows are spread out everywhere. This is bad. Psychology fades into biology. Well, I think, yeah, I mean, that's a very sort of the standard idea that, why aren't they following me? Like, biology is sort of the basis that everything is sort of built off of. And psychology stems from biology, right? Like, our psychology exists because of our biology. Can this cow get out of there? No. Oh, you're right. Yeah, I have to get that to knock that down. I think most of my cows died because of that creeper that exploded. How much meat did I get? I got 9 beefs. That must have meant... Get out of here. All right, Ahana, good night. I think I'm going to call it a night, too. It's getting late. Let's find a good stopping point here. Boom, boom, boom. Get that in there. Beef. Down. Leather. Mr. Clean, what's up, man? Coal, put that over here. I actually need these. Put this up here. Actually, no. Why am I putting that there? I guess coal should go here. Flint goes there. Yeah, Darsh, that's good. You just gotta take it. You gotta continually like advance that, right? And constantly, like even the people that you gain a lot from, you have to ultimately like then question and analyze the way that they think. And sometimes you can even come up with things that like you can expand off of that, and take it in your own direction that makes sense to you, you know, as you sort of internalize it But yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's all good. Okay. Well, I'm gonna need a pickaxe. An iron pickaxe anyway. Those in here for now. Like, I remember, Adarsh, when I was younger, when I was like in my early 20s, I got really like obsessed with early 20s. Like, I got really obsessed with like Joe Rogan and like those types. And like I found myself, I recognized like that I was just sort of like mimicking and like just like because they like resonated with me, I was like mimicking their talking points and like sort of like I found myself really like, wait a minute, like I don't want to just be the guy who's just like, oh, I just copy exactly what they think or people like that think, or anyone in particular. It doesn't matter who it is, but like when you're young, you kind of find somebody who makes a lot of sense to you. I don't know what I'm doing. And you kind of adopt their way of thinking because their way of thinking makes sense to you. And that's awesome. That's what it's supposed, that's like, like mentor, right? Like a role model. That's the goal. But at a certain point, you want to like grow to a point where now instead of, mimicking them or just, not having any of your own thoughts or expanding on it, you want to grow to a point where you are, right? So yeah, I think it's healthy, but it's also important to recognize that it's totally possible there can be some negative connotations with getting too attached or too focused on a particular person or way of thinking. Right. I mean, people do this. People, you do it all the time, and I mean, I do it to an extent too. There are people that I like to listen to and watch that inform and influence the way I think. And it's to a certain extent, it's like impossible, right, to be completely original, and like that's just like not possible because we are humans and we have to get our knowledge and way of thinking from somewhere. We don't just spontaneously become the people we are. So I think ultimately what ends up happening is you have to look at like many different viewpoints, like different people with different viewpoints. Like you kind of have to force yourself out of a very narrow channel. Like it's easy to go like, I just like I reinforcing my ideas with like this kind of thinking and sort of expanding it by like forcing yourself to sometimes like listen to things that, or expose yourself to things that are not necessarily something you would consider otherwise. And like expand it. And the more different perspectives you hear, the more you can kind of synthesize them and come up with your own sort of ways of thinking, if that makes sense. Where you're not just like parroting like one particular thing, but rather you're can I just destroy this? But rather you've sort of combined a lot of different things, and now you have your own relatively unique. It's never going to be like perfectly unique, right? but like your own like relatively unique kind of take on things. And I'm nowhere near that. Like I'm not like saying that like that's not something that is like by any means where I am. Like I'm like all of my thoughts and ideas are very unoriginal. Like there's you know, I don't think I have very many original thoughts, but like that's okay. Like there's not that many original thoughts out there anyway. Definitely Pearson's words. It's the old blind king who used to be wise but no longer is wise. You have to realize when the old way is no longer the great way. You remember? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's just like as you age, you also, your perspective change from the experiences you have too, which leads to sort of different ways of thinking about things, and things that like you know, as you get older, like things that you believe when you're younger become very cringy to you when you're older and have different experiences. Like I remember when I was probably, let me think, like I look at myself when I was in my late teens, early 20s as pretty cringy, like a pretty cringy guy, because I was very like obsessed with like, I had like this weird like atheist phase where I was super like a super edgy like atheist who's like was super like everything was about rationality, and I still have that kind of, but it's very much tempered away as I've aged. And I look at myself back then and it's a little cringy because it was sort of like, you know, unnecessary to be that like adamant about something that other people might have different viewpoints on, and sort of trying to be more understanding of the other things that people can come from. But you'll always look back at your previous self and be cringed. Yeah, exactly. There is not one perfect point of view. Doesn't exist. The world is too complicated to have one perfect point of view. There's too many variables, too much nuance, too much things that are dynamic, too much things that are changed. Things are not subjective. It's impossible to have full knowledge of everything. So there's really no way to have like a perfect answer to anything. So all you can do is do your best to sort of be reasonable and expose yourself to different perspectives. And yeah, that's pretty much all you can really do. It is. My cringe phases are atheism. Yep. But here's the thing. The good news is that it's actually a good thing. If you look back on yourself and you cringe, that's a good thing, because that means that you've changed. If you look back at yourself in like 10 years and you don't cringe, that is bad, because you don't even recognize that you had like a cringe phase. So I'll definitely look back at myself now and cringe 100%. So, all right. I think I got to call it because it's getting late. I think that's a relatively normal phase to go through. Like when you start questioning things, and like, I think when you're young and things are like you enjoy, you like edgy things, like you want to be edgy, you want to have things that are like counterculture, and you like to be able to like, that's sort of that like, you know, Ben Shapiro, I'll destroy you with facts and logic kind of mentality. Like that to me is cringy, but I understand the appeal, because for someone whose brain works in like a rational and like logical way, it feels really justified and really validating to have that like ability to sort of take a person's like argument and dismantle them and be like, how does God exist when, you know, X, Y, and Z, and there's no evidence and there's proof and you're just believing in things that are, you know, unfounded, and I'll destroy you with facts and logic. That's like it there's an appeal to it because it kind of resonates with sort of a certain kind of person who wants to sort of find the truth in things, and so you go through those phases, and I think that's normal. But it is cringy. Every phase is cringy. Nathan, good night, dude. Have a good one. Yeah, so yeah. Parsa, why would what be? Why would what be? Why wouldn't you question him? I don't know. Why wouldn't you? I mean, you don't have to. You don't have to question. I mean, questioning something is really just a matter of like, do you care enough? Is it something that you're interested enough to try and like dig deeper on? If it, you know, and sometimes people don't really care to do that, and that's totally fine. Like you have other things that you know. And the other thing is that like just because something is not like demonstrably be able to be proven true or false, like most things are not able to be proven true or false. So it's like as long as something is bringing you a benefit to your life in some way or another, or to people around you, even if it's not like hyper logical or hyper like analyzed, it's probably fine. So, all right, I'm gonna take off. All right, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your night. I will see you when I see you. Wait, what the heck? This room is completely blocked? Oh, how do I get out of here? How do I get out of my own house? Oh yeah, I forgot I made like a weird room that has no exit. Yeah, all right, everybody. I will see you later. Bye.